This is the last in this series. It's been a little longer of a series. We springboarded from this book, by the way, called Unoffendable. So if you're a guest today, we're giving these away at the guest table, okay? And if you happen not to have picked one up yet, we've got them at the guest table. We've had to order more and more, but I think we've got enough now, okay? So if you didn't get one, or if you're a guest today, please grab one. We'd love for you to have one, all right? So this has been our series. We kind of based it on this book. It's called Unoffendable. And today I'd like to begin by simply asking you a question. What is your natural go-to place of power? Now, I'm not saying it's the right place, okay? I'm not saying it's a place you're proud of, but what's your natural go-to place? I mean, we have that natural place, sometimes because of our family of origin, sometimes because of the stuff we've lived through, of the stuff in our environment that's kind of put us together a little bit. We all have that go-to place of power. What's yours? Is it maybe this one? Is it maybe work, right? That's one of mine, to be honest, because of the home I grew up in, my family of origin. If things were working out, you know what you did? You worked harder, right? You just worked harder. Everything's going to be all right if you just work harder, huh? Of course, pardon the pun, it doesn't work out all the time, right? Here's another one. Strength, right? Is it your physical strength or your mental strength or your emotional strength? That stuff inside you, you're going to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? You always turn to your strength. How's that work for you? Here's another one. Intelligence. Just stop. I'm going to think this through. And by the way, I'm smarter than you, so. Right? In fact, I'm smarter than anybody, right? Yeah. Maybe your go-to place is intelligence, right? You trust your intelligence? Here's another one. Family. And I don't mean just the family you grew up with or your immediate family, but your group, you know? Your group. The folks you hang with, right? Man, if I got to go to a place of power, I'm going to go to my people, huh? And we'll get it done together. Here's another one. Manipulation. We would say, oh no, it's not me, it's not a popular one, right? Of course, we've had that long-running show, what's it called? Survivor, huh? We seem to love it when somebody else is doing it, huh? Of course, we would never do it, huh? It'd never be our place of power to manipulate, especially in our marriages, right? Or with our children, or with our parents, huh? We would never go to manipulation. Is that maybe your place of power? Here's another one. Intimidation, self-righteousness, judgmental. Boy, if you can intimidate the other guy, right? And you can do that by being self-righteous, like I'm better than you. Makes me feel good too, doesn't it? Place of power. If I'm better than you, I'm in a place of power. Or if I can just judge you like, man, you're pretty low compared to me. I had a gal who walked out last night. She worshiped, and she said her go-to place of power, and it's amazing, she admitted it to me, was to be right. And to be right and to be perfect all the time. Yeah, I want to say, how's that working for you? You know, but I knew by what she said to me, right? It hit her between the eyes. I got one more for you. Anger. But we really learn sometimes that anger puts us a leg up on somebody else, doesn't it? If I can get angry faster than the other person, or if my anger can burn more fiercely, right? Puts me in a place of power, doesn't it? But honestly, with all of these, I got to ask you this. How's it working for you? How's your life going when these are the places you go to for power? Or is it falling short? See, this whole series we've been talking about Jesus in John 10, when he said that I have come that they might have life and have it to its full. And that just doesn't mean heaven by and by. That means right now, in how we live in him. You see, he's got a better way than all these places. He's got a more powerful place than any of these places. He tells us in 2 Timothy, for God has not given us a spirit of timidity. And in the Greek, it's interesting. The word, if you rigidly translate it, is cowardice. So he hasn't given us a spirit to be a coward. Read the next three words. But of power. So you want to have power? Read the next two words. That's where power is. That's where power is from God to you and to you in your life and to others. In that place of love. And of course, self-control, that you can live in that love. Huh? I mean, think about it. The greatest, most powerful thing that was ever done, the greatest act of good that ever was done by a man who hung on a cross. And you know why that happened? For God so what? Loved the world. Love is the most powerful thing on this earth. Love will go into eternity. It's the only thing that will. Love. This is where we've always started from this foundation, the little tree up there. This is the root, unoffendable, right? Getting rid of anger and getting rid of resentment. The idea being here that all of the anger that each of us deserve was laid on Jesus, right? My God, why hast thou forsaken me? All of the anger that each of us deserve was laid on Jesus. So it's not there for us from God. And therefore we have the freedom to not put it on somebody else. This has always been the beginning point. And then everything else has kind of flowed from this. Today, it's this one. It's living in the bottom line, grace. But this is almost like everything we've talked about has almost flowed from this bottom line of grace. Put those up there for me. This being versus having to do. In other words, before God, I don't have to jump through hoops. I can just be, and he loves me. And then we can live that way with others. Whoa. That's what relationship is about, isn't it? Being self-righteous, where other people always have to measure up to me, as opposed to just let it go and live in peace. Living in anger as if we think that's going to accomplish something. Anger is an emotion. It doesn't accomplish anything. It gets in the way of action. Action moved by grace. We're living afraid of so many things. Afraid that I won't get mine. Afraid that this won't happen. Afraid that I have to do this. Afraid of the other person. Afraid of oh my goodness. But in grace we can just live in trust. We can trust God. See, everything flows from this grace. Grace is a special kind of love. It's a love that we can only know in God. In the Bible, in the original, it talks about three types of love. It talks about brotherly love. We get the word Philadelphia from that, city of brotherly love, right? So, and that's a good thing. To love one another as brothers and sisters is a good thing. And it talks about eros love, which is kind of need love, physical love. That's good stuff too, right? But agape love is a special kind of love that you can only know in God, and it's only used for others who walk with God. It's a kind of love that Jesus had when no matter what it took, he would do for you. Not because you earned it, not because you were lovable, not because you could do anything, but just because this undeserved love came from his heart. And he would go the way of the cross for you even before you were born. That's the place of power. Everything else we talked about, that's the place of weakness. All those places we go to naturally for power, those are all weaknesses. The greatest power on this earth is this love that's called grace. And it all is funneled together in the cross and the empty tomb. In Romans, the gospel is called the power of God. The gospel means the good news of what Jesus did for you. This is the power of God for you. That the reality that not even death could beat God's love for you. Do you know anything on this earth? Anger, selfishness, strength, Do you know anything on this earth that can beat death? God's love beat death for you. There's nothing more powerful. In fact, in comparison, everything else is in the dredges of weakness. So what does it look like to live in this grace? Peter, we have this verse. It says, humble yourselves, therefore. What does that word humble mean? Does it mean like someone who just has a low self-esteem, you know? So they've kind of got their eyes down and they're just kind of looking down and I'm just a worm. Is that what it? No. Humbleness is to put yourself under God. That's what humbleness is. To let God be God in your life. To receive this grace in your life. And to walk away from all of the power plays and live in this grace in your life towards all. That's what it means to be humble. Humble yourselves under God's mighty hand and he'll lift you up. Read the rest of it with me. 1, 2, 3. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Throw it all on him, see? Trust his grace and live in his grace. Now, as I thought about this, I thought we have two challenges. Maybe I shouldn't call them problems, but they're definitely challenges, right? The first one is that we have a hard time living in grace received for ourselves. And in the book, he told lots of stories, both his own stories and the stories of Jesus, to kind of intertwine them together. He told this story of he and his wife bought a brand new van, and it was a diesel engine, right? Because, of course, they wanted to be better than the next person who was doing terrible things to the environment, right? So this will get 50 miles a gallon. Look how great we are. And the first thing he did is put the wrong kind of gas in it. Right? Destroyed the engine. And so he said, okay, it's going to cost $7,000 to fix it. So I'm getting a bike, and I'm going to ride my bike till I can save it. I'm going to ride my bike to work. And the first thing he did was hurt his back, and now he's in bed for 3 days, right? And his wife was so sweet to him, right? She understood. She said, it's okay. Things will be all right. Oh, it ticked him off. Huh? Why do you think that was? Because it's hard to receive grace, isn't it? We want to do it ourselves. And then the dealership fixed the car for free. And they didn't have to. It wasn't contractually there. And he wrote how, boy, it was great, but deep down it really bothered him, right? And they even pinstriped the thing again and did an oil change, right? How would you feel? Would you kind of want to do it myself? Huh? It's hard to receive grace. There was a story about Jesus. There's this man that came to him, and he said, his son was very sick, had a demon. Can you help me? And Jesus said, it'll be to you as you believe. And you would think this guy would say, man, I'll receive anything you got. I believe it, Jesus, just anything. But no, he didn't say that. At least he was honest. He said, I believe. Help my unbelief. That's how hard it is to trust grace. Jesus didn't say you got to jump through a hoop here. He didn't say you got to be strong. He didn't say you got to do anything. Just trust me. That's what he's saying. Just trust me. And the great thing is that Jesus didn't say, well, the heck with you, pal, if you can't trust me, right? No, he healed the little boy. You see, God's love for us doesn't depend on our perfect faith. His grace is always there for us, and the smallest of faiths receive it. It's not the size of the faith. It's the size of the Savior and his heart of grace. He told another story towards the end of the book. And his son was going to play on this flag football team, and it became known that the team didn't have any coach, and he wasn't going to coach because he didn't know a thing about it, right? Didn't know anything about it, never played in his life. And so he walks onto the field, there's no coach there, and this little boy said, "Are you going to be our coach? Please, can I call you coach today?" So those big eyes are there, and so he said, "Okay," right? And it was a disaster. He was the only coach, didn't know anything about it. They lost every single game by big scores, right? And so in the final game, they were playing the best team and hadn't lost a game. And his best kid, he gets the kickoff and he runs for a score. Woo! Great upset. Here we go. He says, "Go for 2," which they didn't make. And then the other team scored 77 straight points. Yeah. And you think they're totally, completely defeated, right? Except as they were sitting there, the team that had won every game and his team that hadn't won any and was embarrassed, right? A white limousine pulled up, and a mom said to his team, "Come on, boys, get in the limousine. We're going to go have a party." You think the boys hesitated at all? You think they maybe said, "Oh, it's not for me. We lost everything," huh? And then he tied in that story that Jesus told, that we just read a little bit about the guy that, the farmer that hired people early in the morning and said, "I'll pay you this much." And then he hired people throughout the day. And finally at 5 o'clock, just before 6 o'clock, quitting time, he hires a guy for an hour. And then he pays him all the same thing, huh? Tell me, if you were the guy that was hired at 5 a.m., how would you feel? It's not fair, huh? It's not fair. But you see, the point here is that every single one of us is the one that was hired at 5 p.m. Every single one of us receives grace in Jesus, and we don't deserve it. It's hard. It's hard to receive, but he gives it to us. I want to put some grace, I call them gracisms, but just quotes from the book that I said, this is a gracism. So let's look at some. It says, "The goodness of God towards me is not dependent on my attentiveness to it," or how much I believe, right? How big my faith is. Whether or not you currently feel that God is around doesn't alter reality. What are you going through right now that makes you think that God's far away? What are you going through right now that makes you think that God's just not there for you? Or maybe, just maybe, he doesn't have love and grace for you today. That's poppycock. Nothing we go through, nothing we experience, nothing we think, nothing can separate us from God's grace. It's always there. It's like the Rock of Gibraltar, huh? Nothing's ever going to change it. Here's another one. We're all waiting for something that already happened. I really like this one. We're all like a bunch of little ants working to get stuff and going after this and going after that and wanting this and thinking there's more, and we feel empty, so we try to fill it up. The crazy thing is, it's already happened. 2,000 years ago on a cross, God came to you. He came to you to give you life in him. It's what you were created for. See, the reason we're always looking for something more is because apart from God, we're just not filled up. It's like a lock and a key thing, see? We're not complete apart from God because that's the way we were created. We were created for relationship with God and through him with one another. And when we go on our own, we never get filled up. We're always wandering around. We always have the dark shadows over us. But what we're looking for has already happened. Jesus came and he rose again, and his Spirit every day whispers to our hearts to receive him. Somewhere in your heart, maybe for the first time, or maybe in a way or in a place you've never heard before, the Spirit of God is whispering to your heart right now of this grace, this life that God gives us in Jesus. Here's another one. It takes a childlike humility to embrace the love of God, to realize how unfair it is, and then add quickly, but I'll take it. But I'll take it. I used to love to do it. I've done it too much, so I won't do it again, but I used to love to do a children's sermon and talk about hot fudge sundaes, right? And I used to say, if you all had a hot fudge sundae in front of you, if somebody just put it there, would you eat it? And they'd look at me like, well, can I? I'd say, I don't know about you, but I'd eat the thing, right? Because since I was 3 years old, if you had a hot fudge sundae, babe, you put it in front of me, it was gone. I'm not asking questions. I may not have earned it. It may not be for me, but I'm eating it, right? But I'll take it, see? Grace is there, and I may not have earned it. In fact, I didn't, but I'll take it. That's a childlike faith. One more. It takes humility in accepting the world-saving unfairness of the kingdom is no different. Accept it. Breathe it in. Do that with me. Ready? That feel good? I didn't hear you guys do it. Do it. Breathe it in. You might finally be able to relax, not have to worry about how you measure up. And then you can actually focus on other people. Trust him in this. One of my sons, when he was small, he always had a way of getting in trouble. You know, it was not bad stuff. He just had a way of doing that. You know, and so Dad had to step in and say, "Okay, you got to sit down for a while, whatever." And the thing that always amazed me about him is like 30 seconds later, and from his heart, like nothing it's like nothing had happened. He'd turn around and he asked me for some big thing. "Hey, Dad, can we do this?" You know, and it always humbled me because he understood grace. You know, he understood my heart towards him, even though I just had to discipline him, right? He never doubted my heart of grace, and I loved him unconditionally. And so he'd turn around from the plane, and he'd say, "Hey, let's do this. All right, big stuff. Let's go somewhere. Let's do this. Let's go fishing." And I'd be amazed. I was so humbled. I said, "Yeah, let's go." Right, let's do it. Yeah. You see, that's the faith of a child, and that's the faith God's Spirit would give you today in His grace. All right, the second challenge or problem, we have a hard time living in grace given towards others. He told some stories about this too, and wove in God's stories. But there was my favorite one was a story he told about Tony Campolo, who was a youth worker and a Christian writer and a pastor. He flew over to Hawaii, and he was you know how you get jet lagged, and so he couldn't get to sleep, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. He was hungry, so he walked in the only place open, which was a bar, and they gave food. They actually fed him some food there. But while he was there, this group of prostitutes came into the bar about 3 a.m. And this one gal was saying very sadly to the other gals, "You know, it's my birthday tomorrow. And no one's ever given me a party or anything, my whole childhood, you know." And of course, they all just laughed at her, you know. Thought it was and they just laughed at her hurt and pain and so forth. And then they left. And Tony, he said to the bartender, do those folks come in every night? He says, "Yep, 3 a.m. they come in like clockwork all the time." And he says, why don't we throw a party for tomorrow? He says, I'll bring all the stuff. And this bartender's wife, she said, "I'll make the cake. I'll make the cake." And so the word got out, and the place was full of fellow workers, right? Of fellow workers, right? It was full, right? And they brought out this cake, and this gal was in tears. So much so that she said, "You know, can we not cut it? I just want to take it home so I can look at it for a week." And there was like a pregnant pause, and nobody knew what to do. Everybody was touched, right? And Tony said, "Can we pray?" And that sounded like a good thing, so they prayed. Well, after she left, take the cake to where she lived, the bartender said, wait a minute. Did you set me up here? Was this just a big setup? He says, and are you a Christian? And Tony said, "Yeah, I'm a Christian." "Well, what church do you belong to?" And he says, "I belong to a church that throws parties for hookers." And the bartender said, "No, you don't, because I'd be a part of that church." I like to think we're like that. That we have that much grace amongst us. Huh? Because that's what Jesus did, isn't it? In fact, he took flack for it, didn't he? He was always, what does it say? It's like this gong over and over. He was with the tax collectors and the prostitutes, the tax collectors and the sinners. The tax collectors and those people, this is who he hung out with. And they said to him, what are you hanging out with sinners for? He says, I came for sinners, man. Right? And it wasn't as if he was saying everything's okay. He just knew the only way to change any of us is to touch us with grace. There was this head tax collector, Zacchaeus, and he was curious about Jesus. He climbed up in a tree because he was a little short dude. And Jesus stopped and said, hey, Zach, I'm coming to your house today. And then he said, and we're going to have a party. Kind of, right? So Zacchaeus invited all of his other buddies, kind of like who was at that in Hawaii, in the bar, right? Those kind of folks. He invited them all, and Jesus sat down and had a blast with them. See, that's what Jesus did. Another tax collector, who was the low, Matthew, he was so changed by this grace of Jesus, he became a disciple. And even Zacchaeus, it says he became a child of God that day. He began to trust in this grace of Jesus. He told story after story about how this grace is the most powerful thing on the face of the earth. He told how he went with a group to Indonesia after the tsunami. Remember, to work with Muslims to try to help, because they're all Muslims there, right? To work with them humanitarian wise, and they brought food and stuff, and they worked with the people. They just didn't drop it off and run away. They were right there, and they had death threats by other Muslims and so forth, and they were doing the grunge jobs like finding bodies, helping them find. They said, hey, if you find my son's body, please let me know. It was hard work, right? It was tough, and they always were under the threat of death. And finally, the imam, the great teacher there, he invited them to his house. He had lost his son in the tsunami, his oldest son. And while they were sitting there having a meal with them, and this whole time they had been asking, why are you here? And they all only said, well, because Jesus wants us here. He loves us. He loves you. So while they were sitting there, he was so moved by their grace that they offered, he asked them to take his children with them back to the States. Now, obviously, the government wouldn't let that happen, but wow, huh? He talked about a young African-American that he worked with who gave a talk at a congregation, and afterwards, a guy came up in tears, and he said how he had been fighting racism his whole life. And he thanked her so much, and she said, well, why have you been fighting racism in your life? He says, because my father is just such a horrible racist, and he passes that down to me. She said, well, is your father here? He said, yeah, he's over there. And she went over, and she put his arm around him, and she told him that she loved him. You see, love is the only thing that's powerful enough for this stuff. There was a Cambodian man, and he hid under the house while these other men killed his whole family. He was a little boy, killed his mom and dad and sisters and brothers, killed them all. And when he was in a refugee camp, he came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, and all of a sudden, he no longer wanted to kill the people who had killed his family, but rather, he knew he had to go and forgive them if he was going to be a follower of Jesus. And so he went back to his village, and he met these men, and he shook their hand, and he told them that he forgave them because of Jesus. You tell me anything else that is as powerful as the love and grace of Jesus Christ in our world. That's how God's Spirit would empower you to live. And it is the greatest way to live. The way of grace showed to your husband or wife, or to your children, or to your mom and dad, or to our world. Think of our world embroiled in hatred, our nation and our world, everywhere you look. There's no power there. There's only death and destruction. Power comes in grace, in love lived in, not because people deserve it or earn it, but because Jesus has given it to you, and his Spirit empowers you to give it to another. So here's some gracisms here. He wrote, I'm not winning or losing anymore. In other words, I'm not going to war. I don't have to win an argument. I'm going to speak the truth in love. That's what Jesus always did, right? He always spoke the truth in love. He never forced himself on people, but he just kind of laid it out for them, his grace and his way of living, right? And he says, well, I'm doing the same thing. I'm not winning or losing anymore because I'm not even playing that game anymore. I'm off the board. Jesus is giving us a completely different way to live, and it's one that sets us free from anger, free from ever-present guilt, free to really love people, free from constant anxiety, and free to get a good night's sleep. Isn't that cool? Here's another one. This is one of my favorites, I think. Rules don't change anyone's heart ever. Grace does. If you're a parent, you know this, guys. Or hopefully, because I learned that really young. I figured it out. I'm not very smart, but I learned it. I figured it out real early that while I was bigger than my kids right then, I'm not very tall, have you noticed? There'd be one day it was coming quick when they were going to be bigger than me. And the only way my words would have any power in their lives is if they knew that I loved them from the heart. And that they could trust those words because they came from love. Rules don't change anyone's heart ever. Grace does. The woman caught in adultery brought to Jesus. Right? Now, I know it was a setup. Who knows what happened to the guy. But what did Jesus say? First of all, he said, any of you who are sinless, cast the first stone. They all walked away. He says, I don't condemn you either. Then he says, go and sin no more. Let my grace change you. Right? And live in grace towards others. Here's another one. Doesn't matter if I feel stupid. I just want to love people for once. He told us with a little story. He was in an apartment complex with his wife, and there was some neighbors just across the way, and they got in a terrible car accident, flipped over in water, and the husband got his wife and child out, but only the child survived, right? And so this guy's over there with his little boy, and his wife is saying, you got to go talk to him. You got to go talk to him. So he goes, and he's not a great conversationalist. That's what I get anyway. And he knocks on the door, and he says, I just stood there when he came to the door, and I didn't know what to say. I said, my wife sent me, right? But just that action of stepping out of his comfort zone, this guy just poured out his heart. And he would go again and again and just listen. You see, there's nothing as strong as love in this world. Here's another one. God doesn't love all the things we do. He loves us in spite of the things we do. So let's do something crazy and imbalanced here. Let's embrace the unfairness. Why? Because not only is it in our best interest, but also, frankly, Jesus gives us no other option. It's like the man who became a Christian, the Cambodian man, and he knew that he had to go and forgive those who killed his family. He had to give them grace because he knew grace. So last one, we can play pretend and try to set up an aquarium type of existence. Does that make sense to you? Like we're in the aquarium and nothing can touch us, right? Devoid of interaction with anything or anyone who might challenge or upset us, but that's not the world Jesus came to serve. Jesus stepped into our world, into the rough places, into the hard things, and he steps into our lives. He never runs away, and he always gives us grace, and we are empowered to live in the same way. So living in the bottom line, grace. Grace is the power, and everything else is weakness, period. So what does it look like? Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand. Receive grace and give grace, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him. Rest in him, because you can trust him. He cares for you. For God has not given us a spirit of timidity or cowardice, but of power. And where's that power? It's in his love, and self-control, to always walk in love, and not those other go-to places for counterfeit power. So, this week, where you're living in weakness rather than the power of grace is undeserved love, both received and given away as a way of life. What's getting in the way of you receiving and living in the reality of God's grace towards you as a way of life? We've said that this whole series, as a way of life. We're not talking about a little compartment here or a compartment there or a compartment. It was your total life, a way of life that Jesus wants to give us that is the most blessed way to live. Receiving grace and giving grace. We tend to compartmentalize everything, right? Let it go. Humble yourselves under God. Receive His grace in every corner of your life, and give that grace in every corner of your life. Be renewed in receiving His grace and living in His grace, for it all is a way of life. For Jesus said, I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. And may God's Spirit guide you this week. May His Spirit touch your heart with His grace for you, and with His wisdom of giving that grace to those around you. Amen.